Good morning, everybody. It is another week. We are back in action and just excited to be here. Thank you so much for joining us again. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, we decided to yeah, there you go. Little man wants to get behind the mic. Dude.
It's probably best so that they don't just hear heavy breathing and wonder what exactly we're doing. But
I know, right? Just say hi. Yeah, hi. So as you can tell, I just got back from traveling. And somebody wants some attention. Oh my gosh. Okay, get down. This is a work from home environment. How are you, ma'am?
well, I'm good now that I had trauma last week with my cats missing.
I
My
know
cat
you did.
cat, but he's now back. So
Is he feeling better?
This morning he walked along my desk and my nightstand and knocked a whole bunch of stuff to the floor. So I think that's a sign.
That's an improvement.
He's feeling much better. His sister, though, is still hissing at him.
Oh, wow. Yeah, he smells different right now. So
he smells different, but it's been, 4 days now. You think she would be over it, but she's not.
Nope. So yeah, so our pets are interesting. Our working from home environment is interesting, as you can all tell. And but glad to be back. I just got back in late last night from San Diego and Los Angeles for a week, and
I, on the other hand, don't go anywhere because borders are closed. Normally I would, because this is a holiday week in Switzerland, and normally I would be traveling this week, but...
So what is the holiday?
It is Fastnacht, which is the Swiss version of Mardi Gras. And if you're smart, you'll say, but last Wednesday was Ash Wednesday. Shouldn't it be the week before? And I would say, you're right. But this is a fun fact. Basel celebrates Fastnacht the week after Ash Wednesday because 500 years ago, there was a battle between the Protestants and the Catholics. And the Protestants won, and they said, we want to keep the cool party, but we don't want any Catholics showing up. So they moved it to after Ash Wednesday when all the Catholics were in Lent and could not party.
Well, there you go.
There you go.
There's your handy bit of trivia for the day.
That's right.
That's awesome.
We're going to talk about something that's not holidays and not pets. We're going to talk about drugs. So the other day, I stumbled upon this article with the headline, Columbia University professor claims, quote, I do heroin regularly for work-life balance. And it talked about Dr. Carl Hart, a professor of psychology and neuroscience at Columbia University. He says the 54-year-old married father of 3 openly admits to snorting small amounts of heroin for as many as 10 days in a row. So, this was your employee, Brenda.
Wow. That gave me a total church lady moment. Isn't that special?
That's right.
Little tribute to Dana Carvey there. Isn't that special?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
This is an area of which I have changed my mind in time of my career. I used to be really pro drug testing for everybody, and now I'm not.
Oh, why is that?
Well, because I moved to Europe, actually. And this is true. They don't drug test here unless it's a safety thing. Yeah. And so...
well, that's because drugs are incorporated into the culture.
Yes, more so.
Let's make that clear. Yeah.
More so, but not, more so. But the company seemed to operate just fine without it. And I haven't actually seen a lot of the tech companies stopped testing for drugs and so on and so forth. But this makes me really uncomfortable. If I knew I had an employee snorting heroin, I would be very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if it's like I just want a don't ask, don't tell policy. Like, as long as you're doing your work, I don't care what you do. But if you tell me that I'm going to act on it, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here in the US, I mean, there's a couple of things that first off, even though there is a movement that's starting to take root here in the US, and that's to decriminalize certain drugs. Over here in Virginia, there's a bill. They already started the process of decriminalizing marijuana. And right now, if you're caught with greater than an ounce, it's like $25 fine. It's like big woo, right? But there's a bill out that will also decriminalize harder drugs such as speed, cocaine, things like that. So they're actually trying to work on that. I don't know if it'll likely go through because it's 100% Democratic General Assembly right now. Yeah, so more than likely it'll happen. But the Fed and the states are not in line. And this is something that I've seen growing for a while, is that the Fed has got, the various schedules on what constitutes a hardline drug and what doesn't. And then the states are starting to take, their own path, and which is really interesting because honestly, for many years, I've been of the mindset that this is going to wind up going to court. This is going to wind up going to the Supreme Court for sure, because the Fed is never going to get overruled by the states as a whole. But it's really kind of interesting that the Fed doesn't seem to be doing anything about what the states are doing. And I'm not really quite sure why that is.
I think it's probably political expediency, actually.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, this is a battle we know we can't win, and so let's let it go. But as you were saying with the decriminalization of harder drugs, Oregon did that. And they have now decriminalized, as far as I know, pretty much
almost all of them.
Everything.
Which I will not be going to Oregon as a result of that.
Oh, really?
Mm-mm. I will not. It's a different game.
It is a different game, but as I said, I moved to Europe, and in addition to seeing naked old men down by the river, which is not as exciting as you might think.
I didn't think it was to begin with, but that's okay.
Switzerland has marijuana is legal, but everything else is technically legal, but illegal, sorry. But as long as you're not bothering anybody, they pretty much let it go. Yeah. But Portugal has decriminalized all of their drugs and have seen a tremendous drop in things like overdoses. So I find that fascinating, and I don't know how to handle it all. Right. It's certainly not a drug policy thing, but it's very, very interesting to me to see that they had positive results from that.
So how long ago did Portugal do that?
Don't ask me hard questions. I can Google.
Well, you Google. So, if you've never been to Europe, and I've been to 22 countries in my short little life, I remember walking down the street. I was 15 years old. I was in Amsterdam, and people walk up to you and just call out words like hash and coke and pot and whatever and speed and lewds and all that stuff, and then that's how they market it, right? They're streetwalkers, and they just speak of it, and then they can sell it legally on the street, and you can legally consume it in Amsterdam, which is which is really, really interesting. So it is definitely part of a European culture.
All right. It is 2001. It says, since it's decriminalized all drugs in 2001, Portugal has seen dramatic drops in overdoses, HIV infection, and drug-related crime.
Yeah. So that's taken 20 years to get there. Can you imagine what it would be like if the United States suddenly, like as a whole, decriminalized all that stuff? It would be one huge, massive party. It'd be one big, massive, huge mess. And unlike European countries, we have a lot of people right now who are on a little bit of a crime streak, a violent streak. So I wouldn't necessarily say that would go over very well.
I don't know. I think it'll be interesting to watch Oregon, but we should probably talk about the HR aspects of this.
That's true, but I'm just saying, but that leads up to it, right? So all of this leads up to the HR aspects of it, and the position. I'll be honest with you, the position that I'll take is from the government contracting side. So I'll take the federal side, and then you take the other side. How's that?
Fine. I'm pro drugs.
Go for it.
I'm not really pro drugs. I don't even drink coffee. The strongest drugs I ever take are ibuprofen. But anyway, go ahead.
No. You lead it off.
But so yeah, I am very interested to watch this experiment in Oregon. But from an employer standpoint, it becomes complicated when you have the federal law saying one thing and state law saying another thing. And like when Colorado first legalized marijuana, they specifically said in their laws that companies could still require a drug-free workplace and could still do drug testing, blah, blah, blah. Nevada, on the other hand, said you can't test for marijuana. Mm-hmm. And you can't discriminate against marijuana users.
Yep.
And if I'm a Nevada employer, then I'm like, well, federal law says this is an illegal substance. State law says I can't test for it. Now what?
And that's the position that I believe will eventually go to the Supreme Court.
I think it will too. And I do have to say, I am generally in favor of decriminalization, but I'm also in favor of companies being able to set their ground rules and be like, we're a drug-free workplace. And you don't have to work here if you don't want to. So I really dislike the Nevada law that says you can't discriminate. I mean, I'm all for not discriminating based on immutable characteristics, but picking up some marijuana is not an immutable characteristic. That's a choice that someone makes. And I think this can put companies in kind of difficult positions, especially if they're operating across multiple states. How do we stay in compliance with our laws in federal laws and state laws? And like you said, on the federal contractor side, there's plenty of federal contractors in Nevada. And I don't know the answer to how they're working that out. And I imagine there's a carve out for safety positions in Nevada law. I don't know off the top of my head, but I imagine there has to be. I mean, you've still got, Department of Transportation regulations that I know that they can't get around. Exactly. But how is that going to work in Oregon as well when it's not just marijuana? Like, it's crack, that's a problem. Or our friendly professor here, who interestingly is in New York and is just announcing and feels comfortable announcing, with his name and face and everything, that I do heroin. What do you say if you have an employee like that? I mean, he's a tenured professor. That puts another layer of complication in terminating him because he's not at will. But I don't like that idea. So
you've literally laid out like 6 different subjects. So we might want to start tackling them.
All right, let's tackle them.
This is what Susan does. She just goes, and then just like, okay, so which one do you want to talk about? So let's take a step back and let's talk about the difference between the state and the Fed. So we have the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988. Okay. So that is a federal law. And that is, in my opinion, the law is actually going to wind up. That is what is going to lay down the foundation to actually challenge employers who are, or states, circumstances where employers are in this complex situation to where they have to follow. Which one do you follow, the state or the Fed, right? And so far, nobody is willing to go to court for this, but it's eventually going to have to come up. So if you have the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988, which is a little bit more than just saying you can't have you need to have a drug-free workplace, and it gives you permission to go ahead and test people. Stop licking my feet. It also means that company, I don't know what that's about, but it also means that if an employee in the law, it actually requires employers that if they are under a federal contract, to actually respond to it in a specific way. And I think also just in general, employers should respond to it in the same way. And that is if they encounter an employee that has a drug problem. So in other words, if the employee comes out and self-acknowledges or admits that they have an issue before they're actually caught, then the employer should be doing what they can to help provide rehabilitation services to that employee for a certain period of time. Now, with federal contracting, that's a requirement. When it comes to general employment, it's a best practice, but I also think I'd have to revisit the law, but it actually might be in there as well. So Mr. Cornell or Mr. Columbia University, if the university has noted this, even though he is probably a licensed psychologist, that would be my guess. He may very well be. The question I would be asking is, if he's doing this, how is that going to also impact his license?
And that's a very, very, very good question. And there's also a big difference. Like you said, if you find out that someone has an addiction problem, they can go to rehab. And in the non-federal contractor world, you're still subject to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that means you need to provide a reasonable accommodation. But it doesn't mean that you have to allow the person to continue using and working for you. So if the person says, I want to get help, I want to go to rehab, I want to go, to therapy or whatever, then you need to do a reasonable accommodation, but you can still require a drug-free workforce. And the question becomes, how far do you take that? I mean, this guy is saying, I am doing this for recreational purposes, it makes my work-life balance better. He's not saying I'm an addict and I need help. So if he's not saying that, then the Americans with Disabilities Act, I would think, doesn't apply, because he's not asking for help.
Under ADA, they are protected so long as they are actively engaged in treatment. That's
right.
The key.
He's not.
They have to be actively engaged in treatment to be protected. If when they stop, and that goes for alcoholism too, when they stop receiving treatment, that is when their job protection ceases.
Exactly. So this guy doesn't qualify for protection under ADA because he's not seeking treatment. He's speaking very proudly about his drug usage. And given that he's a tenured professor, that's a different ball of wax. But I think you have a very good point about this. I am pretty sure that drug use is going to hurt his licensing.
Oh, absolutely it will. So the thing is that with this particular topic is that what we're starting to see here is that you can't scream decriminalization, but yet have a double standard that you're fearful of somebody's safety or capability of making, sound decisions. Like, you can't have it both ways. You can't sit there and say, Mr. Professor, who is a potential, we don't know if he's a licensed practicing, psychologist. He may very well be, but let's say he is. So you can't say, yes, we can decriminalize, drugs, but yet you over here who is, keeping the sanctity of human life in check, you can't do it. Right. I mean, it's just, it doesn't work.
But sure you can. I mean, you can have there's a difference between decriminalization and making it legal. So it's still illegal in Oregon. It's just not, they're just not going to charge you with a crime for using it. And that's a slight difference, but also businesses should be free to make their own rules around it. That's like one of the things that I said. I don't like the Nevada rule that says you can't discriminate against marijuana users. Using marijuana is a choice. And now there is addiction. We can talk about that in a second. But starting to use marijuana is your choice. That's the thing. The first time you do it, it's not an addiction. You chose that. And I, as a business owner, I may someday own a business in Nevada because it's got no income tax. And it's right by my parents in Southern Utah, where I'm going to move when I move back to the US. So maybe I'll do my business in Nevada. But anyway, I should be able to say, I don't want anybody that's using drugs to work for me. And I think that's fair. And I don't think that that conflicts with saying, I don't want drugs to be criminalized, because there's a lot of reasons to not want them criminalized. And, you know, that's another podcast. But as a business owner, I should be able to say, these are the standards for my business. And then, of course, with compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which says if someone is getting, as you said, active treatment, then that's a different thing. And we can work on a reasonable accommodation with them. But I also think for our employees that are struggling, there's a lot of people that are struggling with drug addiction that you would have no idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
No, not at all. And you know what? When you take a look at it, there's so many layers of complexity to this, because you've got decriminalization taking place. You've got employers who are starting to now no longer test for, because it seems, like it doesn't make sense. It could potentially be a waste of money, kind of depending on, the person's view on it. Right.
Right.
Are they okay with it? Are they not okay with it? Does it impact, how does it impact the company? Does it make sense, for the organization to worry about it or not worry about it? But, there's also still OSHA's general safety clause that's in place, and that is the responsibility of the employer to provide a safe working place. And so when you've got individuals, like there are companies out there that actually do encourage employees to go out and take a hit of pot, right? Take a little pot break. There are people out there, and it is part of the company culture, and that's great. But let me ask you what happens if somebody goes one step too far and they wind up taking a little bit too much. And oh, by the way, it happens to be like your lead salesperson, and they completely bomb a major deal.
Well, I mean, you could ask the same question with alcohol consumption, which is legal for anybody over 21.
Yep, absolutely. But the outcome is going to be the same, is that if you're encouraging certain types of behavior, where I'm going with this is that it's also going to be really difficult for you to actually make a stand to hold that person accountable for a bad decision, but you're the one that's influenced that individual to go down that road, right? So it has consequences to it that are just beyond legal.
This is absolutely true. And this is why I'm so broad spectrum on this, because I'm also really not a fan of alcohol at any work functions. For those very reasons. Liability attaches when it's the company handing you the alcohol. As a business owner, I don't want the liability for your drinking. I totally accept that you're an adult. If you want to go out and drink, have at it, but I don't want you doing it on the clock. And I don't want me to hand it to you and then have you be able to come back and say, I got in this car accident, or I made this dumb choice, or whatever, because I was drunk and Suzanne gave me the beer. I don't want that liability, and the whole, idea of the Mad Men 2-martini lunch. I'm not a fan of that, because you're knowingly having people under the influence back in your office. And that's just it's not a risk I'm willing to take. And I do think business owners should have the ability to say whether they want to take that risk or not.
Yeah.
And I think it's also perfectly reasonable, even in a case where drugs are decriminalized, to say, look, we are a drug-free workplace. Or as it is with alcohol, you can drink all you want when you're not at work, but if you're drunk at work, that's the end of it.
Well, I mean, I think every business owner really has to. I mean, this is there's a lot of, back and forth. There's a lot of yeah buts and what ifs, and there's a lot of things that you really have to think about when it comes to doing something like this. And the question is does it even make sense for your business? When it happens, how are you going to respond to it? And if you're doing almost everything right, meaning that you've got a handbook, you've got a code of business ethics involved, but this is a gray area that has a lot of potential to, sway one direction or the other, you're going to have to draw a hard line somewhere at some point in time.
And I think you can't just wait until suddenly it's your employer on the internet, not your employer, your employee on the internet announcing that he does heroin.
And that's what happens, is that people don't make a decision about these types of things. And then when they're faced with it, then they're forced to have that hard line versus actually working whatever direction it is in their culture into their work culture.
And this, I think, is really important. I think this is one thing that we've also learned this past year with the pandemic, is how important it is to be proactive instead of reactive.
Exactly.
Make your policies now. You can always adjust them if you need to later. But think through this. What are you going to do when suddenly your employee is announcing this? Because I guarantee this guy is not the only white collar employee out there that's doing drugs.
Agreed.
He is not. And as I said, there's so many people that are addicted. And the difference between this guy and your addicted employee is a lot of your addicted employees really want help and don't know how to get it. And that's something that I really feel like we as HR can be a little bit more open to that. I'm always singing the praises of employee assistance programs, for helping people, and to not come down in judgment upon someone that comes to your office and says, look, I need help. That saying I need help should trigger the ADA, and we can help get them help that they need. But you don't have to tolerate people coming to work drunk or high. You don't have to tolerate it.
No, but that's, you don't have to tolerate it, but yet, again, that's where you're going to wind up being in this hard line. And if you're opening as an employer, if you're going to open yourself up to something like this, then you really have to think through. It's like, if I open myself up for this, then what are the consequences? What am I going to have to face? What is a company? What are we going to be facing? And the big question is it worth it or is it not? Because it's going to be a lot of heartache. I mean, I'm running on the conservative side here. And I think if you maintain a drug-free workplace mentality, you're going to have fewer issues to deal with in the long haul. In addition to that, you can maintain that, yes, you are in fact a safe workplace, right? Because we've got, just from a culture standpoint, not only do we have different perspectives on this, but we have religious beliefs. We've got, people with histories that have family members who, are drug addicts. You could have an individual who's a drug addict, and next thing you know, it that works for your company is a recovering addict, has been, clean for a while, and now all of a sudden their coworkers are, going to have to take a, company recommended pot break. It's like, there's so many complexities to this that it's going to be difficult not to take a hard line somewhere.
You're never going to get me supporting the company sponsored pot break. So
no, you're not going to get mine either. Sorry.
that you have my hard line on. I mean, my hard line is probably harder than yours. I don't like alcohol in the workplace either.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
And if you do allow, pot in, in the workplace, so to speak, it's like, what is that going to do to your liability insurance? Those are extra costs. There's so many things involved in this that, and not to mention, look, the heroin snorting professor over here, that's an addictive drug.
It's
heroin
super
is a highly addictive drug. And if he says that, he's only smoking, snorting a little amount in a very short period of time, guess what happens to people who use heroin? And I know this because I have a family member in my house my family who used it. And I can tell you right now, you start off thinking that you can control it, but the first time you take it in any form, it owns you. So even though I think what's coming out in the press is he's saying this, I'm going to call bull on that one because I know better.
I tend to agree with you. I imagine this is more self-justification on his part, and I can quit anytime I want.
Yeah.
And to emphasize that, I'm going to talk about it, but it's an internal struggle. But because he's not getting help, if he were your employee and not a tenured professor that's no longer at will, if he was just your average at will employee, he wouldn't be eligible for ADA protection because he's not getting help. And I think that needs to be very, very clear. But if someone wants help and is willing to get it, then I think we as employers should work really hard to help the person get that help that they need, because A, it's the right thing to do, and B, from a societal standpoint, if you can get somebody clean of their addiction, that's better for all of us.
Oh, I agree.
And keeping people employed is extremely helpful in helping them to end their addictions.
Yeah.
CDC just put out an article that talked about the increase in drug usage over the pandemic as well.
Yeah.
It correlates with unemployment, man. It's a bad deal.
Yeah.
But
and
yeah.
Lastly, too, and this is where my other hard line comes in, is that when you look at this from a business standpoint, this is the company's reputation that is also on the line, and guaranteed. If I'll tell you what, first off, if I was a parent and I found out that there was a professor at the university that I was sending my child to that was openly stating that they use heroin like this, I would have been on the phone to the president's office in a heartbeat.
Yeah, as a parent of a soon-to-be college student, I guess in 2 years, but anyway, soon to be, I agree with you. That's not who I want mentoring my kid.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
I'm enough to join him, but
Now, what would happen if a Jeff Bezos of Amazon came out and did something like this, right? The board would lose confidence in them. But again, this is where that double-edged sword comes in, right? It's a double standard. There are people that applaud, being brave and bold and doing new things like that. But you know what? There's still people looking out for their better interests. And so, when you've got an employee that openly comes out and says something like that, you really have to look and see how is that going to negatively impact your business? Because it's going to.
It's going to. And I mean, here we are talking about this guy at Columbia. They are not controlling this message.
No, they are not.
I am this drug user that's a professor at Columbia. Columbia has lost control of that. And that's a problem. I mean, this is why we caution you about social media in general. This isn't even social media. This is traditional media. This is a news article.
I guarantee you their marketing department did not bless this.
I guarantee they didn't either. And I suspect that he didn't bother to give the PR people a heads up either.
No, not at all.
And because this is not an expose. This is not some deep reporter that dug through his trash. He's like, hey,
this is 15 seconds of fame. Yeah, this is 15 seconds of fame. And I was going to say one more thing. It was like right here.
Okay.
Right here. I don't know, it went away. I'll probably remember it like 3 a.m. and wake up and text you. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this.
And make it a comment on the YouTube video.
Yeah, that's like, oh yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, this is a very complicated issue, and it's getting even more complicated. Especially about companies trying to figure out what they want to. Oh, I know what I was going to say about it. Now I remember. So even though you have people that are stepping out into, what other people may perceive as being a very brave world, like here's an honest fact about people.
Okay.
And if you don't believe me, just create a list of people that that are like this. In one hand, so let's say, for example, what if it was a university professor that was smoking pot? All right. Let's downgrade this from snorting heroin to smoking pot. All right.
All right.
What if this employer, or what if this, person came out and pot wasn't as loosely used today. Let's just do this. Let's pretend it's 1980 something or other, right?
Right.
And you had a university professor that came out and said that they they take pot because they do it recreationally. There's a certain thing that happens, right, in a human being. And this is where human dynamics get really complex. We've both admitted on here on this show that if we were parents and we found out if we were sending our kid to this university, this would not go over very well. Okay. It wouldn't. And if we were in this situation back in the 80s, it was probably the same thing, right? Didn't matter what drug.
And just say no.
That's right. Good old Nancy. Anyway, no, Nancy Reagan. So, but here's the other thing. There's a percentage of people who are saying, I would not feel comfortable sending my child to school because they are doing this, that are also doing exactly the same thing in a closeted manner.
This is true, but just to be clear, I am not doing the same thing in a closet.
No, I know you're not. I'm not either. But I'm saying that's what we're gonna. But that's part of what we're up against.
I drink water.
There you go. Where I'm going with this is that, there's supposed to be this what's good for the goose, good for the gander type of thing. But in reality is that even though Columbia's, got a heroin snorting professor, but the people that are complaining about it, there's a very high likely probability that there's a big element of that population or an element of that population that could be abusing pills, or they're taking lesser drugs. Right. But because it's public and it's this, they're disagreeing with it because it could impact their child. And what they do personally is hidden secret and closeted, and their kid doesn't even know about it.
Absolutely. And there's all of these things. And part of that also prevents people from getting help that they need. Some drug addiction starts with a legitimate prescription, and the person doesn't intend to end up as a drug user. And if that person is afraid of getting help because of the stigma that comes with it, that's a bad situation. And that's something also that we can do as HR is, remind people there is help available. Here is our EAP number. And when you're structuring your benefits, right now you should probably be thinking about what your benefits are going to be for 2022. It's never too early to prepare for the next year's open enrollment. That's something that you want to think about is what can you offer your employees in this area? Drug treatment's terribly expensive. It is.
And it's hard and it's complicated and it is one of the largest drains. I'd say it's right up there with terminal illness and drug use are the top, dealing with somebody in your family that is a drug user and terminal illness. I think those are the top two, probably a most emotional draining next to suicide. I feel those, but they're also the top two most expensive.
Yeah, that's going to be something that's terribly expensive. Premature babies may be up there with the super expensive.
Yeah, I would agree too. Yeah.
But yeah, it's super expensive. But again, it's something that you can think about and, dare I say, talk with your broker about. Because if you have any number of employees working for you, if you've got 100 employees, you have someone that's addicted.
Totally.
Multiple people that are addicted. If you have 20 employees, you probably have somebody that's addicted to something. And some of them will function quite well for a long time. But then at some point, they won't anymore. And if you can make it clear that they can get help with no repercussions before it becomes a problem, then that's a huge benefit for your business. It's also going to be easier for them to recover if they don't have to destroy everything in their lives first. So let's think about what we can do as HR to help our employees do better, and be grateful that we're not HR for Columbia University or the PR department for Columbia University. I think I know somebody that works in PR for Columbia. I'm going to message her. I think I'll have to look her up on LinkedIn. She an old editor of mine when I worked for CBS News. I think she's over there. Anyway, I'm going to check. But
yeah, that'd be interesting. All right, folks. So you can find all of this really juicy, good information, plus more over in our groups. We both have 2 groups that we engage in with our peeps. And why don't you tell them about your group, ma'am?
I don't want to. I'm going to tell them about your group. So
I'll see how you are.
Brenda runs a group called Next Gen Women in HR, and it says women, but men can join too. And that is private, and so you can actually have some confidence, and she does a really good job screening to make sure it's actual HR people in there. So you can bring up some good points, and actually Brenda just posted, I'm going to share something you posted in there. Because it's private, now I'm exposing that privacy. No, Brenda took a screenshot and blocked out all of the identifying information of somebody who had just declared publicly some negative things about their job as an HR person. There are negative things about your job as an HR person. I know it, you know it, Brenda knows it.
You're probably here because you're feeling it.
Yeah, when you start putting that on a public thing, your employees see it, your boss sees it, it doesn't go over well. Yeah. It doesn't mean that you're not struggling. So this is a place where if you're really struggling and need some help with some moral support, it's confidential, it's HR people only. And so that is a great group for getting that kind of a help that you need.
Absolutely. And then Suzanne's group, which is the Evil HR Lady, it's an open group. That's an awesome place to go both places you can go and ask questions, but aside from the fact they have the best, funniest HR memes on the planet.
Yes, we do.
Yes, you do. And they're really good about it. But this is a larger group. What do you have, like over 3,000 people now, don't you?
6,000.
You're at 6,000 now?
We're 6,000 people.
Wow. That's awesome. You've been doing this, since 2017?
I think so, yeah.
I think it was, yeah. But it's a great group to go into. It's a great group to engage with. You throw a question out there, you'll get a lot of answers. Our group is, honestly, a little bit more on the beginner level, but there's nothing wrong with that either. We also have tenured individuals too, but there's multiple places where you can get feedback. But Suzanne and I actually do participate in each other's groups as well. So from time to time, we'll interject and we'll throw in what we think and support one another and support everybody else's stuff. So it's a pretty awesome group. And then there's also one other really cool thing that I want to share with you guys. Let's see if I can do this. Here we go. This is a planner that I put out. I shipped Suzanne a copy of it.
It's on my desk. Well, or it might be on the floor since my cat pushed everything to the floor.
Probably like it. But it's a really great opportunity for you to get done what needs to get done, even if you don't know what's supposed to get done. It's really the intention behind it is to help keep you on track on what it is that you need to accomplish and help you build that confidence in yourself and your ability to make sure that you're not missing deadlines, what needs to get accomplished. In addition to that, it also gives you an opportunity to really look at what you need to do from a strategic angle. So that is the best HR planner on the planet. We do have a little something that's coming up. We're going to give a little teaser. Yay! Just a little teaser. It's coming back. We don't have a lot of details right now because we're actually waiting for something specific to happen. And once that does, hopefully we'll get that to you next week. But we could possibly be doing another HR summit, and we could possibly, maybe, kinda, stay tuned. It's a definite maybe. Give you the ability to actually earn some recertification credits.
Yes.
So that's awesome. That's maybe. Right. So my little company has now become a HRCI and a SHRM recertification provider. So watch for that. Suzanne maybe might be doing something, but I'm just going to leave all of that right there.
Possibly.
So, but anyway.
I already have slides for it.
So keep your eyes open. There's going to be some more stuff coming down the pike. You can subscribe to both of us because we'll definitely get that information out there. But we're looking forward to getting more information out, giving you guys more help in 2021, and just helping you crush everything in front of you. So
absolutely
wonderful. Well, thank you so much,
right.
everybody, for joining us today. And, we flashed our social media stuff up there a few times. And if you want to connect with it, by all means, jump into the group sites. And we will talk at you guys another time.
All righty. Good.